fight it with all that is in us. And may God defend the right.
Warning, warning.
We've got to stop them! They're going to kill us all!
See how the trouble you've started?
Be they the government, be they industry, be they organized labor, be they anyone, or human beings. Time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported talk radio station, throwing ourselves upon the gears of the machine. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
You called down the thunder, well, now you got it. Right, you tell them I'm coming, and hell's coming with me, you hear? Hell's coming with me!
Revolution Radio.
Mini Ice Age Conversations podcast. It's about observing cycles, sharing insights, and solving problems together by combining historical, climate, food, and economic data so you can make informed decisions as we shift into a new era. Here's what was, this is what's coming. Our world is never going back to 2019, so what will the new era look like? And most importantly, what is immediate that will affect the pocketbook and the outlook into next year so we can all get ready? Thank you for joining. I'm your host, David DuByne. Right along here with Ransom, Godwin, Mountain High TV. We wanted to talk tonight about bringing out the hounds. Bring them out. The amount of crops being lost across the planet is astounding. Yet, what's everybody focused on? California, 5 feet of snow in this storm alone, one of the biggest November snowstorms on record. You got 33 all-time record cold records dropping in Alberta, and it's going to be 20 degrees below zero next week across the U.S. The cooling in the southern hemisphere, nobody's paying attention to except the grain traders. Where are the distractions? Because your food is going bye-bye day by day as they're not able to get it in the ground. So Ransom, thanks for joining tonight. You know, it's been a weird week. I just been out working on my chicken coop, trying to lay low after all the madness. I knew there'd be a bunch of skittish kind of energy in the air after the election. So I was just like, all right, I'm just going to drop out of that. I'm just going to go work on my chicken coop, going to work in the back field, and here we find ourselves tonight. You know, I'm on the weather news already, coming into these record cold temperatures, crops being lost, and, there's been another downgrade, might I add. This time down to 170 bushels per acre from the initial 193 or so. So it's going to continue downward. We'll be in the 160s by the time we end this, and it's going to get interesting. Okay, maybe Ransom not there with me because I forgot to add him. Ransom, hold on. That's why. Hang loose. We'll add him in here. Ransom joining us in about 3, 2, 1. If you're over on Vigilante TV, watching us live, as well as Mountain High Time, Mini Ice Age Conversations podcast on YouTube, Ransom Godwin Facebook page, Mini Ice Age Facebook page. So Ransom, I see you joined. Yeah, that was my bad. I didn't invite you in. Sorry, I was a bad host. You got to stand in the corner.
That's right. Stand in the corner. Bad guy. No, I've been watching kind of glued to it, even though I didn't want to be. Because I had
100% opposite. I'm taking zero interest in it at the moment until I figure out what's going on, man. It's an overload.
Right. Well, I was just watching it unfold like I predicted it here at home. I was telling my kid, would they kind of do this every time? There's no surprises to me. Me personally, I'm not saying that anybody's brand or name or anybody's saying there's election denier. Myself personally have not believed that there has been a real fair by the people election probably since 1963. That's my opinion. But I was watching this and it's like this fake wrestling thing that I joke about a lot. I'm watching it unfold. I can pick all the winners and losers. I can tell exactly which seats they'll go after. I knew exactly which ones they would have problems with, ironically. It was pretty predictable this time. The elections kind of went on the same path as 2020. I don't even have to say much more than that, but, there's
Banana Republic is what you need to say after that.
Yeah, well, there's problems in different places, but if you pay attention, the only people that are really, in a toss-up for their seats or are about to lose their seats, as far as on one side of things, are people that didn't believe the last election rolled out the same way. So I knew that they would be targets. Like there would be some shenanigans right around in exactly the districts and the governor races and the Senate races and all that. And if we really are a country, if everything's exactly how they say it is, trust the process, trust the science, trust the government. If everything's, shipshape and up to standards there and everything's done right, it means the U.S. voted in a guy that can't string a sentence together. Not once. I wasn't even talking about Biden, but the guy Fetterman also. So that's twice now. That they're showing us that these are empty suit positions. That's what I think this is. And the
dead guys, too. Don't forget the dead guys who got voted into office.
I forgot that. Yeah. It's a joke, though, because, they do this every time. So you get a Democrat president. What they usually do on the midterms is split it up where they have just the right combination of Republicans and Democrats to not do anything for 2 years. Right. And then it's just a big, long presidential cycle. So they're going to keep everybody distracted, divided, with high emotions all the way until 2024. So they got this all planned out. They already know how people are going to react. People forget that this group of elites has been studying them for a long time, like rats in a cage, studying everything they do, their patterns, their likes, their dislikes, how to trigger people. How to make people think that you're part of the team. They know exactly. It's like the science of tribalism, and they have it perfected right now. So they're going to have all of the main bulk of people totally distracted. You got Christmas coming up. Everybody's going to be, reliving the midterms for 6 months, and then they'll jump right into the presidential drama. And just like I predicted, they're going to put out the same clowns. Like the World Wrestling Federation kind of stuff or whatever it was called. I don't know. They changed the name of that so many times. Anyway, the fake wrestling, they'll have the good guy be the good guy for a while. He's popular. Then he's the bad guy. Then they flip him around. But they're all playing for the same company, so to speak. That's all I see going on right now. And it's just mind boggling, actually, that they're basically telling the public, look, we told you were stupid, and look, you prove it. You prove it every couple years that you'll buy anything.
Hook, line, and sinker. Crypto. Now, you knew there was going to be a market crash after the elections. You knew it. You knew gas prices are going to rise. Like just as Ransom's saying, you can see things out in the future. Well, it's quite easy now that all the mechanisms to stop any kind of market instability and crashes and flash crashes, like the crypto thing that happened and the liquidity dry up for FTX, so they couldn't even get emergency loans in there to get the crypto to keep their exchange running. Well, they could have easily gotten that under control, but they didn't on purpose. So FTX crashes, takes a lot of crypto with it. So I've been following the crypto downtrend here because in my mind, I knew after the election there was going to be a crash. And I can't believe it happened like the very same within 24 hours of it being over. And I'm like, wow, that was fast. So now they're saying there's going to be triggered margin calls across the entire regular, what you consider financial system, stock market, etc., because they were so heavily invested in FTX. A lot of these countries had billions and billions and billions in FTX, and they're going to have to scrap it as a zero. But at that same time, because that got taken out or whatever, there's margin calls happening that are like dominoes through the financial system. So I was expecting that would be the beginning, since it was on yesterday, on Wednesday, that today's Thursday, that it would have some market contagion, and possibly as quickly as tomorrow, we go into a banking holiday immediately after the election. It wouldn't even surprise me. But I am calling another thing that at the end of the year here. It may not be a banking holiday, but everybody in the United States will not have access to their money at some point. There'll be some reason why you can't get access to your money. Now, will it last forever? No. It'll be a very short thing, just a scary thing. Because, again, pushing the emotions. But as I was looking through the winners and losers of the crypto space today, if you would have been in cash, and you were waiting for a downtrend in this, markets in general, more crashing. Like, yeah, Bitcoin, you could have bought it at, 14,500 if you'd made the market right. I was watching Ethereum drop down to like under 1,100, and I was like, oh, that'd be a great place to buy it if I was going to buy it. And it settled there, and then boom, it's right up to like 1,350. But the thing I found was Litecoin was the best one to jump into. Dropped down to $50, and then it went up to 65. So in another downtrend, you might want to think, not financial advice, but Litecoin had the best return on that. If you were out in cash and you were going to plunk like whatever you had down in for that instant gain, because you knew it couldn't hold that long, that deep, that low for forever, it was going to bounce right back up again. These are shenanigans that are going to be played again and again and again across this economic landscape now that the elections are over. Oil's going to run like a scalded dog. Forget the strategic reserves and all that. Just Russia cutting off the oil, and then OPEC not meeting their quotas, our energy production shut down, and then oil's going to run high efficiently right after the election. So you can see these things. So by the end of the year, everybody distracted at Christmas and New Year, like you said, things are going to get astronomically high in really just like a blink of an eye. Because you could think, how long has it taken us to come up to this point right now? And people are finally noticing. It's a water cooler talk now. But how long did that evolution take, do you think? I'm going to say, I started talking about the fertilizer shortages that would be hitting in March, April, May, when the planting season started. So a good recollection for me was things would start then and then get really expensive by the end of the year. It's absolutely 6 to 8 months for most everybody on the planet to notice it, like in your face now. What's next? What's the distraction? It can only be because we talked about this last time. What would be the biggest distraction to create fear? And we talked nuclear war a little bit, talked about supply chain shutting down. What if everybody in a country lost access to their money for a day or a week? Now, how would that throw everything into a tailspin? And especially if it was a super large economy like the United States. I might anticipate it happening over in England first or somewhere, Australia, but they already played their part with the vid down there, locking everybody down and getting everybody in order. United States. If we lost access to our money for a week or even 3 days, what kind of ripples would that send around the economy? Around the world, excuse me. Everybody would be terrified. It would be even scarier than having a nuclear weapon drop, because you lost your money, you lost everything. It's all locked up. You can't even get money for bread. Oh, what? That's what I think is coming by the end of the year. Some scare where everything in the whole world will lock up, resulting in Americans not being able to get to their money for several days. Crypto, if you ever see, not financial advice, but if you ever see a giant flash crash like that again, that was massive. Like, you just don't see those types of downtrends. I thought that was the beginning of something bigger, and I still think it is. That was the signal flare. Sometimes if you have quakes before a volcanic eruption, this is exactly what that was. So anyway, Ransom, I'll bring it back over there to you because I sent you that video about, what was that, New York, and how all the percentages were the same. That was a little bit unnerving to watch that video, to say the least.
Yeah, there was a lot of hokey stuff, and it's hard for me personally to believe, whatever your political affiliation, that you would vote back in the same people that shut down all the business, that locked you up, that made your kids stay at home. Like Whitmer there. You remember when she told everybody that they couldn't buy non-essential goods, and then they roped off all the seeds. Remember that? And then they started. Yeah.
Just like
so. Oh, go ahead. I think this.
No, I'm sorry to interject, but to put a preface on that, you're right. Like, humans operate at a certain level. And the reason a lot of these things are happening in the world is complacency and stability are the number one priority for the human. It just is, because we live for how many thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of years running from saber-toothed tigers. So to have a stable environment that doesn't rock the boat, that's what you're looking for. But the human stability factor is completely thrown out of the window. So as us as just a human species, we want to return to the stability. So I just don't get it how they would continue into the chaos when for millions of years we've always run back to the stability. Doesn't make sense.
It kind of does to me, because they've incrementalized people into this position where they think it's a state of normality. All of the, simultaneous emergencies going on around the world, obviously are designed to have the normal working person, because actually there's a whole thing about how the human being is wired. We're wired to deal with things that are right in front of us, like you said, the saber-toothed tiger. We're not really wired to deal with problems that are far off in the future. And the elites and the people that plan things, the planners that keep planning, they know this about human beings, and that's why they set up things that are in the short term a big distraction for people, because that's the only problems that they feel like they have a part in or can do something about. Meanwhile, incrementally, they change things over to a whole nother system, and that's what we've been watching. And just from me, going through the headlines for a long time and kind of being a news junkie, when I look at these headlines like this, after having a bunch of economic turmoil and problems for the last couple of years, and then I look at the front page of Drudge and it says, shock rally sweeps markets, Dow plus 1,200, Apple's up, inflation eases. I know that that's a temporary thing, and it's ironic that it pops up right at the midterms. Also, another thing, the midterms are over now, and if you didn't catch on, Zelensky wants to have peace now. All of a sudden, he wants to have talks. I think that's actually just a distraction. They're going to lull everybody back into a state of normality here, where they feel like the emergencies are over for a short period of time. And I think that's right up about after the New Year's, we're going to start seeing a lot of shaking up around the world. And part of that's going to be going on in China. They're about to obviously make their move. Not only the U.S., but also the Chinese governments are both saying that they are going to make their move. And there's a lot of people that are, showing us what they're doing right in front of our face. Here's an article from InfoWars where it's talking about the secretary, or what's her name, the media secretary or whatever she is, that the White House press secretary, excuse me, saying that, Biden, he doesn't really mean that we're going to shut off all the oil. He doesn't really mean that we're going to shut off all the coal plants. And then, of course, that's exactly what they're doing. So it's the lie to your face and say you don't really understand what you're hearing, and you're not sophisticated enough to know, all of the stuff that goes in governing, and we're doing a good job, and the recession's over. So I already know that that's kind of it's a fairy tale, because every other place that you look, you still see all the signs of things collapsing. And I think that's exactly how smart they are, is that they have everybody doing this infighting that they're going to be doing for the next couple of years. Meanwhile, all of the important things were set up in the previous 2 years, and those are all going to be taking effect. And I've been seeing more and more, so I found an excuse to watch entertainment because I kind of was bored with it, and realizing how much manipulation is in it, and agendas and, cultural things that they're throwing in there, trying to make certain people look bad and other people look good. I now have found a new reason. So I'm looking at the predictive programming. It's so fascinating to me. And I'm noticing a pattern of an overall story, which anybody could say, yeah, well, that's just coincidence. But in these stories, they put up a lot of specific dates, and 2030 is one of those dates. So I was breaking down, I'm making a video I'm going to put out that's breaking down the movie Terminator that came out in 1984. Now, a lot of people, they just overlook that and they think, oh, yeah, it's about the robots taking over the AI and mankind's all slave. But it's actually a really complex propaganda piece for the next decades that were to come after the movie. Now, you got to think about it. It's put out in the year 1984. So we all know the connection there with the, George Orwell and the whole idea of the 1984 society and all of that. But if you really pay attention to what the movie's about, in the year 2029, after an apocalyptic war, and then you go back and you find out what's the war about. Well, the war is that the elite and the government and all of those people handed over their power to an AI so that they could become transhumanists. The AI then turns on the humans, and there's a nuclear holocaust, blah blah blah. Everybody knows that part of the story, but really think about it. So in 2029 is the future. That's basically 2030 in the future, where the transhumans, part organic, part machine, they let AI run everything, have decided that the human population is too much. We got to get rid of it. It's a threat. It's hurting everything. It's hurting them. They're the new system. So they send a transhuman, half human, half robot back to the past to abort, right? To go commit an abortion on an unborn child that might be libertarian or have some freedom ideas in the future, which is a real problem for the transhuman, setup that they made in the future. And then I keep looking at these other movies. So my son just got a new game. All of these kids right now play these war games. Ironically, they may be living the real thing soon when they get drafted, but they all like the war games. And in there, he was kind of bragging about it and showing it to me. And they have a whole plot about these cargo containers with missiles in it that were made in Russia, but they're a U.S. product. And I thought it was so ironic because there was a YouTube channel called Headlines with a Voice, and she died of cancer, I guess, a year or two ago. Someone else took over. But in 2016, she broke a story about how the Obamas were sectioning off pieces of the coastline and giving contracts of the docks and things to the Chinese and the Russians, and allowing specific companies to move in who just so happened to build weapons. And they're part Iranian, part Chinese, and part Russian, little connection that the Obamas were handing out land leases on our coastal areas for. And that company just so happens to make that exact weapon that they're showing all of these kids now. So it's like almost 10 years later, they're putting it in the fiction now. So everything that they're putting in fiction, if you kind of cross-reference it, they're all doing it in real time. And every one of these scenarios involves human beings being reduced in number due to starvation and other ecological disasters that we cause ourselves, i.e. the climate warming, whatever idea that they like to shove down your throat. That's always part of it. But an overlying idea of all of these movies and shows is first we're going to have a nuclear war, and then a eugenics war. They keep bringing this idea up. And I ask you, is that not already in motion right now? We're creating fake meat and fake food. And I just wanted to ask you this to top this off of the little woo-woo here. I saw an article on Twitter talking about the Chinese, and we all remember for a while now that they've been testing vegetables, testing fruits, vegetables, all kinds of stuff for the, virus that's out there that they're looking for. Now, everybody thought that was cuckoo and it's over the top, and they really wouldn't come up with a reason. But I was sitting there the other day just looking at this video of them testing each and every fruit and vegetable on an entire shelf, right? And they're putting little Q-tips in their thing and they send it off to the lab. And immediately it brought to mind the fact that there are biotech companies all over the place right now that are buying up farmland, buying water rights, and guess what they're growing? They're making mRNA food. vegetables. And it made me think maybe China is actually looking out for their country because they're testing the foods that are all in their country to see if it's been contaminated with a eugenics idea of manipulating the food on Earth. So, everybody's talking about crop losses and fertilizers and all these other things, but what they're not realizing is that all of the natural species of vegetables and fruits on the planet are being bombarded with genetic pollution from these biotech companies. So we may be in a scenario very soon where no one has a choice but to take these alien, I don't mean alien to the human body, compounds and genetic components, RNA and DNA from other things that's coming not only through the medical industry, but through the food industry. So if we get shut down worldwide where there's a food problem, which it looks like there is, I mean, you can see that everywhere, developing a man-made, supply chain famine. And then on the other end, there's all of this weird biotech stuff going on with the food supply in the background that no one's paying attention to. You could see that there might be a problem where you will not have no sources of food. And it's not just the fruits and vegetables. It's the milk, it's the cheese, it's the butter, it's the meat that you're eating. These prions and spike proteins are everywhere. And you got to ask yourself, why did they do a full spectrum pollution of the entire world of this brand new technology? If they, know what they're doing, it doesn't seem to be making sense, the actions that they're taking, unless there's another agenda going on that's much darker and much bigger than what we've been talking about recently. And that's the fact that they're about to change over to the system where there's only one outlet for information, for power, for food, for everything. And here in a minute, I'll show you some articles where basically military in the U.S. and politicians have already seceded or conceded, they've already conceded the idea that China will overtake us, not only governmentally, militarily, and economically, being the one and only superpower for the one world government.
Well, maybe if I put a big enough Christmas bow on that. No thanks, get your own tree. Yeah, the food. Celeste Solon was out here, met with her, had an interview, and she was saying that, DARPA, the way they want to move forward selling food was by the molecule. Because when you get into printed foods, you're printing the food, but it's basically a shell. It doesn't have the vitamins in it. Doesn't have it. You can strip away anything you want out of that, and once you print it, it looks similar to, but it's devoid of any nutrients, minerals, etc. So you'll have to add in vitamin C, vitamin D, vitamin A back into the food as an upsell. Because printed shell, you get you get something that's holding that shape, but inside. See, and the United Nations wanted to sell 1/1000th of a calorie, the food, by weight. Moving forward, DARPA wanted to do it by the molecule. Now, put that in perspective. That's where they want to take the food. So what if your social credit score is not good enough? What if you don't have enough universal basic income? Because think about it. If you're going to be buying food by 1/1000th of a calorie, by the time you get to 1 calorie, that's 1,000. But if you get 2,000 calories a day, you're talking like 2 million units of that you need to have a 2,000 calorie diet per day. Will you be limited to 1 million units, 750,000 units, 1.5 million of those units, which means you can get a 1,500 calorie day of food in your belly. But it's all going to be controlled. It's all going to be printed. Then you're going to have to add those extras inside it then, which is a kind of a scary way for things to progress, I guess.
Yeah, I just wanted you to hear this one little quote from this guy. He's the commander of the fleet, or let me put it the right way here. He quotes, "This Ukraine crisis that we're in right now is just a warm-up." Navy Admiral Charles Richard, commander of the U.S. Strategic Command, said this week at a conference, "The big one is coming. And it isn't going to be very long before we're going to get tested in ways we haven't been tested for a long time. And then it gets into the article where he talks about, basically America is not and cannot build things, but China can. And it's basically all the way down to they can just make more soldiers and more horses than we can. And, if you know anything about the Second World War, supposedly, that's the only reason that the Allied forces won is because we vamped up massive production here in the United States, putting out so many weapons, so many airplanes, and so many tanks that the German forces, although, there's other stories about why that is, but supposedly that's the official narrative is that we just outproduced them.
Wait a second there.
Yeah.
The official narrative I have for both World War I and World War II were to destroy the rest of the Tartarian technology and wireless power systems that were still remaining around the planet. Put that in your pipe and smoke it.
Yeah, well, they were definitely doing that. The whole idea was, and just think about the Austrian-Hungarian Empire was a modern day kind of version of what the United States was supposed to be. They were letting people in from every ethnicity, and he was trying to keep a country that had true diversity. And they used that to destroy them from the inside. They balkanized everything and made everybody revert back to tribalism there, and everybody took sides real fast. So we're in that same scenario now. The only difference is that, they have hidden the bankers' influence a lot more than I think they did back then. And to get into that, I think they're about to start pulling some tricks on the public. NASA recently just had an inflatable UFO launch, right? So they flew this lit up UFO balloon through the sky and then started bragging about it because I think they're about to take control of that entire narrative as well. Judging by the articles that the people from NASA are putting out, most of them having to do with extraterrestrial discovery is just around the corner. They even estimate there's probably quadrillions, right, in the universe that they could just count from basic equations. I remember you were wanting to get some questions in from the audience, so I thought we could do that now, about 30 minutes after the hour here.
Excellent. Yeah, I wanted to pick up on some of the comments, and get a real discussion going. If you're listening to us talk tonight, I mean, you're part of the conversation. So feel free to toss a comment in. One of us, we'll spend a couple minutes here. So, Ransom, what do you got? Choose something of your liking.
Let's see here. Well, you mean question-wise?
Yeah, because I'm I'm up here on the freedomslips.com Revolution Radio chat board, taking a look at both Studio A and Studio B comments that are coming in. And
well, there's a bit of delay in the chat room, so I'll give them a second to ask a question there. Let's see. Oh, you're in there too. I see you. Yeah, so you got
I'm on the feed on the Mini Ice Age Conversations channel there. I'm also going to jump in, and we got Ryan helping us out tonight.
Sweet.
So I was trying to come back to 10 o'clock. There we go.
What do you think about this whole, because the incrementalism that I was talking about earlier is kind of well in effect, and I think that's why nobody is really batting an eye at the fact that their government is taking control or retaining control, I should say. And that's all I saw in these elections is that they were all the neocon type, rhino type, leftist on the Democrat. All of those people all kept their seats. And it's kind of unbelievable to me. So I don't know about all you guys. But I think that they're just going to try to lull everybody back to sleep here through the holidays and then reintroduce the hard times here in the springtime. That's really what I think is going on here.
Yeah, because up on the Revolution Radio chat board, Guerrillian Matrix, voting won't change jack shit, as in a sheet on your bed at this point. See, I'll totally agree with that because look at the power structure that's been in control for the last 3,000 years. Now, 3,000 years later, still offering you two choices. Right. And if you look at the electromagnetic field of our planet, it's really starting to twist and bend, and very noticeable now that things are absolutely off of their regular, normal flows of when summer begins, when winter begins, especially in the southern hemisphere. Like the whole thing is about food and the amount of food available to feed the populace of the planet. So going into this event, governments are going to protect themselves. That's what they do. They're governments. That is their mandate, is to protect itself, much like a corporation. You're not even on the list. You're not even last on the list. You're just not on the list of things that they care about to keep themselves in power and continuity of government. So to vote this, unless all those House reps and senators are farmers with Bill Gates, they're worthless at this point. It's all going to be about food, access to food, exports of food, imports, farm inputs, importing and distribution, and then that final yield, being able to put that on rail or getting on a barge that's going to be reliable enough that we can move grains around the planet. But right now, Argentina is in such a drought that they cannot even supply Brazil 6 million tons for the year. Generally, they're exporting 12, 13 million tons, and they don't even have 6 million tons in total for all the exports for the whole year to even give Brazil. So Brazil's out there looking for an extra 1.5 million tons of wheat. And we got this whole thing going on in Ukraine, and there's just more and more losses coming. And then Brazil, is going to just hold on to their soy crop because they know it's going to rise in price. So they're not even going to export it. So when you look around it, is this, how many narratives are there? That those are all distractions from the food being lost on the planet. We're at the point now where we don't grow enough to feed the populace. And from this year forward, every single year forward, they're going to be pulling out of those grain stocks. It's technically called a carryover stock. You carry it over after all your exports and internal demand is met, and you still have some left in the silos. You didn't sell it through the calendar year. They move it into the next year, and they call that a carryover. Like maybe I have a warehouse and I have, 100,000 tons. I didn't sell it. It's still there. USDA will count that as me moving it from 2022 to 23, a carryover. But if somebody comes in and takes 50% of that, and then it's not refilled, then there's a problem. And this is exactly what's happening. So the voting, you look at it, it's so in your face that it's not in any way, shape, or form legitimate any longer. It really is. When I saw that thing with New York with the percentages being exactly the same after they went through each individual county, I was just mind blown that there shouldn't be an instant investigation into that. What happened? Like, you can't have that precise of numbers. 0.16 at the end every single time with the exact same numbers on it. I was shocked. I really am. I even pulled it up for you. Oh, it was 63.10%, 34,311 votes for Lee Zeldin on the Republican side. And you go through wherever he won in the Republican county, it was nearly identical. Two of them were exactly the same at 34,311 votes, was 63.10. And then when you went to the Kathy Hochul, that was even more ridiculous, where it started to be the same through every single counting in the poll stations. I was just baffled and shocked. 69.64 with 73,693 votes again and again and again and again. It's like they split it up in the algorithm and just sent it equally across all the counties. Like, it's so in your face, truly in your face. And that's the distraction, because we're coming into famine, global famine, crop losses right now. And how that's hard to control. Global famine crop losses are inbound because they cannot and will not be able to grow enough food in the southern hemisphere coming. With all the ridiculousness that we've seen here this last 8 months, power shortages in Europe, can't even manufacture the fertilizers for next planting season. We're down 40% globally for that, and then we're already down almost 30% anyway. So we're going to be looking at a global total of a shrinkage of available fertilizer and herbicide pesticide of 70% as we move into the planting season in the northern hemisphere of 2023. But then the just Charlie Foxtrot that's happening down in the southern hemisphere with all the plant, or I should say, not planting and reduction of crops and droughts, and just it's starting to happen everywhere. So the reason I was being a little long-winded with that, they're going to keep throwing distractions as the food. I'm trying to do some sort of ratio. The more the knowns on the crop loss side, the intensity on a scale from, say, 1 to 5 of distraction that's put in place when there's data released and traders start to understand and move markets based on the crop losses in the southern and northern hemisphere, both in conjunction at this moment. Like, what are we seeing out on the landscape? And the closer we come to this, what will be known as a global famine, and everybody will understand it. Just as it took about 9 months for everybody to get the inflation in your food and understand, like, your cost of living rises in the energy. It took like 9 months for people to wake up finally and get it. But now everybody in the world knows what's going on. Clearly they do. The whole planet gets it. It's going to take about another 6 months before they get it with the famine too. And that's the scary part, because as much as they're angry about inflation and these things, once the realization of there's not enough food growing to feed the populace from this year forward, that's going to be an absolute society-changing event. Once it gets to the water cooler talk, like it is today with everything we're seeing, just the average person knows that something's not right, and there's just huge mix-ups and mess-ups in the way that anything is functioning. Like, everybody sees that, and they get it, and they collectively understand it. Your stuff's going to get more expensive. Oh, okay. But what happens when they say you're not going to have enough food for your family? That's not going to be an, oh, okay. That's going to be something very different. But see, that's going to be within 6 months. So if you're looking at timelines to try to get to your preparedness, that would be one of them. So anyway, Ransom, I'll toss it back to you, and I'm going to look through a couple more comments here.
All right. Well,
anyway, Gorillian, thanks for that thought there.
Dan Rod says, with China hoarding all of their grain, and South America isn't going to sell, where is America going to get all of its grains from? I know you touched on that a little bit. And a question I got also for you is, why do you think they're trying to, push out all these fake headlines that the economy's just doing super duper all of a sudden the day after the midterms? And how long do you think that they're going to keep that up before they start telling you the doom and gloom of the markets again?
Yeah, I can't speak too much except that with the Mississippi River still really low, the barges are still stuck. I've been following that pretty closely on how many barges are stuck and in which parts of the river. It's mainly in the southern part of the Mississippi. But you can't export either. So they're stacking up barge after barge after barge, and these are all that barges are, they call them corn shuttles is a proper name for it, wheat shuttle, depending on what's inside, going outbound down to Louisiana and then down out to loading ports. Or if some of the ships had loaded and they were heading down to, say, like Panama, and that was their final destination, they would just load upriver because they're smaller vessels. That's going to be a huge problem inbound and outbound. So even if you did need the food, and even if we had it in America, currently they're not looking at any way to really ship vast amounts of food out of here until April, until the river refills after the snow melt. Like, one thing that is inbound with this massive freeze and everything that's coming, any precipitation that was going to go into that river will cease for the next 2 weeks. It's just going to be locked in ice and snow. And it's not just a little freeze. I don't know if anybody has seen what the GFS models are looking at, but already this early in the year, it's going to be something like 20 degrees Fahrenheit below zero. It looks like many parts of Idaho and Minnesota, and even further down into Was it North Dakota, South Dakota, further down parts of Nebraska going to be looking at 0 or below already? That's kind of early for that. Parts of Colorado, you're going to get slammed out there too with this cold. So with all the water drying up, and then there'll be frozen pockets, which will stop more water from flowing. And then traditionally, like every lock and levee and everything just freezes over, and they just stop any kind of, they're going to empty the water out of them anyway because they don't want them to freeze. Like you wouldn't put a full bottle in your freezer now, would you? Nope. You probably want to either empty half the water out of it so it won't crack your bottle, but they dry those locks out so there's no expansion from the ice that would crack the concrete. So that whole dam and levee system that's further up and going up into the Great Lakes, St. Lawrence Seaway, they're already done with that pretty much for the year. I think November 1st is when they really start to really clamp down or stop shipping out of that because they don't want that stuff to get stuck in ice. Imagine you're transiting through, you get stuck in ice. We can't even empty the lock now, can't empty. Europe's having a tremendous problem even producing anything. Like they're almost at a standstill in Europe. So where is the food coming from? That's a real important question. Now, China, main buyer of soy product, soy. But Brazil is one of their biggest trading partners. And just a few days ago, I did a video where the Chinese government was reviewing this good for delivery exporters out of Brazil. And they were expanding the list and bringing it up to date, which means China's going to be in there very shortly buying anything they can for soy because they're updating their exporter list right now. Soy isn't wheat. And I was looking at some of these atrocious planting figures that they were going to do in the Ukraine, and then the agriculture minister came out and said, we're not even going to plant any winter wheat this year. So regardless of what's happened up to now you got Ukraine talking about not planting any corn or winter wheat this year. And then it's the next knock on. Okay, well, let's say China gobbles up all the soy out of Brazil. Uruguay is struggling at best with cold temperatures. They become a soybean importer when they used to be a soybean exporter. Then you got to start to do all this Rubik's Cube out on the world stage here. Currently, there's so much grain stranded that, that makes a huge difference if you can move it or not. It's stranded across the Black Sea. It's stranded across the EU. It's stranded across the United States. Now, those are major players that are exporters. And then over in Australia, it looks like massive losses. There's some are even calling up to 100% loss of all the wheat on the East Coast. So see, this is where we really do sit. Like, where are grains coming from? And who gets to get them? Are you going to take the quoted market price, or are you going to say, well, I'm a China government, I'll give you an extra $1 a bushel over? And you're like, whoa, really? Okay. How much extra is that per ton? We'll take it. Thank you. That'll be a private deal. It won't even be anything with futures delivery, anything. And then this is somebody I talked to that was describing to me, this is the exact scenario they envision, that there's going to be a breakaway from traditional market pricing because there's always going to be somebody more at this time moving forward that will need it more than the next person and willing to pay more for it in cash than the next person. So there's going to be this divergence. At first, it's going to be $1 a bushel, maybe, and then it'll be $2 a bushel. And then suddenly, you're going to pay 50% more. You're going to pay 75% more than the market rate cash. What if you give double what the rate is? What if it's $8 and you're like, I need it so bad, there's riots on the streets, I'm going to give you 16. That is going to disrupt the market in itself. Just even $1 over on a bushel. Geez, people would be jumping in the streets for that. Yeah. Farmers would be rejoicing, backflips. Pigs would be jumping in the fields. Yeah. But this is where it's starting to move off to as well. So, you think about the two things in tandem. The financing for it and the pricing for it, and then the delivery is just not there. That ag conference I spoke at, they talked in depth about rail deliveries just losing 20% of the rail cars is just so choked and so tight on traffic right now. They can ask anything they want and they don't have to deliver, and they'll cancel in a moment's notice. And the barges too, like usually there were extra barges, but they were all nobody knows where they went to. And now all the barges that were on the Mississippi River and up in transit channels offside rivers, they're all full. So it's kind of come to a standstill until they can unload somewhere. And I'm not talking about unloading on the side of the bank and then trying to pick it up later sometime in the year. I'm talking about really getting it on a vessel and then taking it outbound. This is where we sit. So that, maybe it's a long-winded answer for your question there, Ransom, but where will the grains come from is a good question, because if you can't grow them, then where do they come from? And even these people that say, well, we can bioprint our food, we can print it. Well, what goes in the backside that, like a raw ingredient or paste or something made out of some grain, that's got to be the base to start the printing with. You can't print air, Like where's that input stuff come from? Oh, it comes from something you grow. I got it. Yeah.
Well, here's one to think about. This is an article from CNN, how they're great at news, but every so often they have a pretty interesting article in there when it's not kind of politically charged. Here's one talking about all the wells running dry as the drought, if I could talk, weary Southwest, as foreign-owned farms are guzzling up the water to feed their cattle, but not here, overseas. And they're talking about how the laws and different stuff won't allow them to dig down to the same depth as the other place. So they show this little graph here. Oh, I'm not showing it to nobody. Here you go. A residential well depth that's about 300 feet, and then they have the regular farming well depth that's about 1,000 feet. And this is the people that are growing all the grains and different things. And then you have over here the deepest farming well depths. And what they're saying is down here at 1,500 feet, these foreign companies are buying up all these land, and then they're just pumping the aquifer dry, meaning that the farming farms that can't drill down as deep because they're not owned by the same commercial conglomerates, don't have the same rules. They can't drill at the same depth, and they're saying because of the worst drought in 1,200 years. This is just another indication that we're squandering resources instead of putting them into food growing as a nation and just as a people altogether. I mean, everybody right now should be, even if there was no outlook on any kind of negative thing, there's really no argument that you shouldn't be prepared for bad times, because we know there are good times and bad times no matter where you live, from hurricane areas to earthquake areas to flood areas. And so you can just expect that there is going to be bad times. I mean, think about looking back in your lifetime, and think about any time in your lifetime where there wasn't on the news or happening somewhere in the world a major earthquake, a major flood, a hurricane, some kind of, combat situation going on, or some other kind of excuse. And you can just go in and start looking and dissecting each one of these events, thinking that they're just random occurrences that just happen in cycles. And then you start seeing that, people like, let's use Henry Kissinger, for example, in the Middle East, starting wars, making wars happen all over, changing the price of goods in other parts of the world. And I see some of the same things happening here. This is the same plot. And remember, that's the same guy that said that you could use food for a weapon. And all of these plans, or at least of that type, I'm not blaming him specifically, but most of these billionaires are part of the World Economic Forum. And when you listen to them, they say they're doing exactly this. They're using food as a weapon, water as a weapon, and then they're politicizing the governments to basically sit around and fight with themselves as the, it's like the guy that sits around and, denies the smoke. I know I said this before, the analogy, but when the house is on fire, everybody's distracted with what's on the TV or, what the next drama is. Meanwhile, their entire future is disappearing from them, and they just can't seem to see that.
I can add some names and I can add some crops to you. Wells are running dry in Southwest. We're talking about Arizona. And the foreign-owned farms are owned by Saudi Arabians. And the feed cattle overseas, sorry, that's to feed their horses high-grade specialty alfalfa. That was one of the huge problems that I was reading about over in Arizona. They're digging the wells so deep because Saudi got the endless money. They can go as deep as they want. They have the lobbyists that then talk to the state representatives that allow them to dig extra deep. And also the number of wells on the property. Also, there's some workarounds for that too. In the foreign ownership, there's a different clause than even for American farmers for the amount of wells allowed to be drilled. So all it is, yeah, they're just plunking deeper wells down and they're draining as much as they want, unchecked. But then anybody like you or I, it starts pulling from the water table, suddenly our wells are dry. And they're still flowing free because they're down an extra 500 feet deeper. They're not going to run out of water for years and years and years. So how much would it cost you to refurb your well and then go down and then, try to keep up with that? So see how CNN, they didn't name the Saudis there, and they sure didn't name the alfalfa. I watched the craziest special about it. Like, they just bundled it up and put it in what you consider like 40-foot containers and sent it back to Saudi Arabia because it's cheaper to grow it here, which is the craziest thing. Like, I didn't know alfalfa was that expensive, but then it was for these prized racehorses, and it's only certain types of alfalfa, but on scale. And every single container on a single ship is full of alfalfa going back to Saudi Arabia. We're back in 2 minutes and 2 seconds. I'm David DuByne, your host with Ransom Godwin. Time for a quick breath. Chicken factory.
Listen to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
What would it feel like to have your health and wellness in balance?
All disease is simply the improper replication of the DNA molecule. FCE, full chronic extract, when you grow the plant indoors with no contaminants, and then you get 120 cannabinoids, what that does for your telomeres and for your DNA is incredible. It is absolutely the best as far as being able to get your health back. A good phrase would be there's no such thing as disease, just a lack of a good immune system. So if you can enhance your immune system, this is definitely the best way to do so. It's definitely the best thing from an immune system standpoint. If you take the position of, I just want to enhance my immune system, 120 cannabinoids is done through what's called the entourage and full plant extract compared to others that are out there and no contaminants. That's what's huge. So there's been tens of millions of dollars put into this and many people have had benefits from it type stuff. So this is about full spectrum and being able to get the entire benefit from the plant. This is the first time ever with a patented process to actually do that. If you take iron supplements, there's 4 different types of iron, and then the challenge is you have to have stuff that goes with it so the body will absorb it.
So this is a lot like when you take vitamin D so you can absorb the other vitamins. You kind of need the full spectrum of vitamins to get the benefit of each individual one. Absolutely. And the thing that people notice the most is sleep. They have really, really deep sleep and they sleep extremely well. And if they stop taking the product, then immediately their sleep is disrupted again. This is something that the Chinese and Egyptians and so on and so forth. So the research is more than just recent, it's extensive. So full plant extract, it's done indoors, aeroponics. Once you've got that, then you can get the full spectrum. People find that it resets their metabolism. So there'll be a lot of things that they're eating now, including sugar. It'll make it so that you will not desire to be able to consume the things that you're having challenges with. So wheat, dairy, sugar, all these different things. It'll balance your system so that it'll get you to the point where your metabolism is correct and your palate, what you desire to eat, will change drastically.
The entourage effect is a proposed mechanism by which all the cannabis compounds interact exponentially in a synergistic manner to modulate the overall effects of the plant. The benefit of the entourage effect is the increase of the therapeutic experience. More compounds consumed in whole plant medicine typically means a higher likelihood of pain relief, anti-inflammatory action, anxiety relief, just to name a few. The endocannabinoid system, ECS, which is now being recognized as arguably the most important system in the human body, since it provides some degree of master control over all the other systems. In short, the ECS helps to balance many of our physiological systems and supports the body. The fact is, the ECS impacts just about everything, including appetite, immune response, calorie burn, pain and inflammation, and even cellular health. Its most important overall function is homeostasis, which basically means that it helps to keep the body in a healthy balance.
The changes coming up in the food pricing and the inavailability of medicines because China has shut off the spigot for base chemical materials to produce our antibiotics. A lot of things are going to shift. And having something that's produced in the United States that seems it covers two different arenas, something that's going to happen with your body because your food choices are going to change. And at the same time, if you're unable to get whatever medicines there are.
Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And now we're going to get back to your host.
And welcome back for the second hour of mini Ice Age conversations. I'm your host, David DuByne, with here, Ransom Godwin. Oh, the world has spunneth. As I'm looking at the images here that are just so hard to believe that they were carved out of marble that we can't even replicate them today. And it doesn't seem that they've broken after hundreds and hundreds of years, although them being paper thin. Pretty interesting. Was it printed or was it not? Now, before we were heading on the break, I was talking about Saudi Arabia, taking so much water out of the desert, as deep as they wanted to go in Arizona, deep and, growing the alfalfa and then shipping it out. So, freedomslips.com, Revolution Radio, thank you for letting us host the program right here. Studio A, anybody consider free speech something important as we move through this next chapter that Ransom and I have been talking about? Consider a donation, because myself, when I do this story and feature it on tomorrow's video, there'll be a little box under that says, United Nations says it's this thing. We're responsible for the changes. Okay, so I'm waiting to see how much money I need to deposit in which place so they can stop the weather. I don't think they can, but we're looking over here at low temperatures in Alberta that's associated and coming with this storm here that'll be hitting the U.S. Jaw-dropping 32 Celsius below zero or 25 Fahrenheit below zero. Like zero and then -1, -2, -25. So they broke all these temperature records. So for me, as I'm looking for cooling across the planet that mimics the Tambora eruption of 1815, moving into 1816 is when they felt the effects of it in the Northern Hemisphere. A full 1 year after the eruption in 1815. Subsequently, we were going into our planting season in June, and that was 1 year after the eruption. So for me, I'm starting to look at the same parameters. So remember that eruption in Tonga was in January of 2022. So we're coming up almost on a full year in another 2 months. So we should start to see some unusual cooling that just doesn't make sense. It's an outlier. So these are the best things I could look for here, especially this cooling list of these different temperature stations that broke temperature records. So at Stony Plain, the old record was 22 below zero and the new record's 24 below zero. Okay, that is within the normal bounds, 1 to 2 degrees or 1 or even half a degree. Okay, I'll take it. But Vegreville The old record was 23 below zero. The new record's 29 below zero. When you start to see things that are 6 degrees difference in the temperature being broken, that's kind of astounding to see it. And here was another one, Sundry. Old record was 22 degrees Fahrenheit below zero, but the new record, 32 Celsius below zero. A full 10 degrees cooler with the new record. And I'm thinking, wait a second. And then Wainwright, it's the old record was 22 degrees below zero, and the new record was almost 30. It was 29.7. So again, that's 8-degree difference in the temperature being broken. That's really significant. Like 8 and 6, that's massive. That's incredibly massive. Like before, when I started the Adapt 2030 channel, if I would have gone to this city, Rocky Mountain House, their old record was 25 below zero. The new record's 30 below zero. I would have been focusing on that because it was 5 degrees difference, and that would have been so outstanding and so outrageous that I would have covered it in a story because it was 5 degrees. Like the temperature's being smashed by 5 degrees. Like, whoa, that's incredible. That's insane. Then Milk River, it's down 6 degree difference in the temperatures. Hendrickson Creek, 6 degrees Celsius different in the temperatures. And you look through some of these, this is astounding when you see such big jumps. Esther, 6.2 degree cooler than the previous record. And if you're looking for signs of why things are going to amplify politically around the world, it's because now it's actually provable in the data that we're going into a year without a summer. It's provable now. Data points everywhere. Tomorrow when I'm on Mike Adams' channel, I'm going over to Mike Adams' studio. Mike, thanks for letting me broadcast again. Brighteon TV, 2 to 3 p.m. for anybody who's interested in watching it live. Mike has given me a slot. I'm super appreciative of that, so I can go on once every 2 weeks and talk about the roundup of what I see my dots connecting. And they never say, Father, just like, you make your dots connect. If it's interesting, people will watch it. These are the things I'm trying to connect here. Tonga eruption, and now Uruguay, very provable temperature records. So what I've started to do is, since we're at the 1 year period right now, generally in temperature records along most countries, you have a 1 year record, which would be from November of last year, all of November, all December, which was pre-Tonga eruption, 2 months included, and then all the months until now, 11 months, 10 months. So I'm looking for the anomaly in the temperature. So you got 2 months of regular temperatures, then you have 2 months of regular temperatures and 8 months of Tonga eruption aftermath stuff in the atmosphere. Water vapor, sulfur dioxide, ash. And that'll give you an anomaly compared to the year. But when you come closer in and you look at the 6 month data set, which is squarely just 6 months back, all in the after Tonga eruption phase, way cooler than the averages. And when you come in to just this month in October, because November's not completed yet, so you can only get the best October data. When you look at October, you're like, whoa, that's some incredible cooling on a month-by-month basis, because there's another couple of months before we reach maximum cooling. And just like Tambora, just like Pinatubo, it took a full 12 months before the full cooling was felt, and it reached that bottom point. So we have another 2 months and a week. And then it dragged along for 2 years, and then the ash came out of the air and weather systems stabilized again. Crop production increased. See, this is why there's all the distractions, because we're going to, for the next 2 years, drag along a year without a summer. But see, it's measurable now, and that's the whole key. It's measurable, which creates the awareness, because if you can connect the dots with data points, now it is a story with data behind it versus conjecture. And this is exactly the same way it started out with all the fertilizer shortages and the herbicide shortages and all those things where the outputs were not there is the reason we're getting sub 170 bushels per acre for corn this year. Subject to much ridicule in the beginning. But now people go, hi, you seem to have a crystal ball that's pretty accurate. Like, what's going on? The amount of chaos that you're going to see in front of your eyes is directly related to this now provable data stream that's coming out about all these record temperatures. And it is just the beginning. And how many are going to be smashed across the United States? How many were smashed in the previous cold front just last week in the United States? More than 1,000 all-time cold record temperatures 2 weeks ago. And now we're coming into the next phase of this. So it's really not going to take too long before news organizations start to put it together, because I will say that I don't often follow the Daily Mail. I do occasionally pull an article from there that somebody sends me. But they are now talking about how the Tonga eruption is going to cool the world. So it's fringy, but it's out there mainstream now. So Ransom, I don't know how you think it's all going to play out, but, we could probably find something in like a balance of scale. The more crop losses, then what do you think the next scare for the planet to distract will be? It's got to be the money. It's got to be a war amplification and something else with another spike on it, maybe.
Well, let's talk about this winter. I mean, you were just talking about, record temperatures. I have the Farmer's Almanac up, and, they're warning that this is going to be a hardcore winter. You better have chocolate snowshoes and a flannel. Forecast for lots of snow, lots of rain, and mush all on the east side of the U.S. And what does that mean? So, for the topics we're talking about, like, we brought that up last week about how all of this grain and food is just sitting on the side of supposedly a dry river. Well, obviously that's going to change this winter and spring. So what are the odds are that they're going to get all of that food up, put on trucks, put on rail, put on whatever it needs to get on before it becomes flooded or covered in snow?
30%.
30%? Well,
yeah, probably if they're lucky, because there'll be another breakdown to get the loading. Like, that's almost a perfect thing to remove more food. See, you hit that on the head there.
Yeah, and then we cross over. So that's already in the workings. And here's a good article by the Mises Wire: the end of world dollar hedge money, turning the USA into the Weimar, if I can ever say that. Weimar, Germany. Weimar. I can't say it. The Republic, the one that went broke and, fell apart.
Weimar.
There. Yeah, Weimar.
Hey, maybe I'm saying, I don't know. That's the only way I don't know how to say it,
Well, we
don't have the German accent. It'd probably be Weimar or something.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. And then we look across the board here. The unemployment picture isn't as pretty as they want you to believe. And why is that? It's because nobody's making none. There's no factories doing nothing. We really aren't doing anything. And I showed a little while ago a little map that somebody put up on Twitter that was kind of demonstrating all the countries and the deals that they're doing now, and the difference between, I think it was 2018 and then 2020. And most of the world has gone over to doing business with China, according to that source. And it kind of makes you wonder, what are we making? What are people going to be doing for a living? Whenever these shortages start happening? And then you look at this: Americans pile on another $25 billion in consumer debt. Meanwhile, the federal government is taking in record amounts of, tax. They're just piling it on money. Where's it going? Nobody knows. But this is an interesting topic. I remember, I think it was last year, you told me something about, even though all of this stuff is happening all over the world, that you probably weren't going to get too worried until like Amazon and people like that decide that they're going to roll back and not send as much stuff, to people trying to get around all of the other problems going on societally with the economic situation. So they're going to be trying to order stuff, which is a common fad nowadays, is just to get all of your stuff off of Amazon, have it delivered right to you, whether you live out in the boondocks or you live in the city, it doesn't matter. But I'm looking at a lot of articles talking about like a shutdown in employees. They're cutting costs. They're cutting employees. And here's an article from Zero Hedge. FedEx plans to park planes, cancel sales. World trade appears to be rapidly deteriorating. And remember, we were talking about that, about how when tensions rise there in Europe and also in the South China Sea, that's going to put a major, blockade situation or a block at least for international commerce that people are used to getting. Where does most of that stuff on Amazon come from in the first place? A lot of it comes from China because they're making, a lot of stuff. There's stuff coming from Indonesia and Taiwan. So we're about to see which way the billionaire companies are going to go. And I think it's with China, not some of the other retailer countries. And then when you look at that, people aren't going to work as much as they say they are, and also there's not as many jobs to do. And then you start seeing these companies, which we're talking about, Amazon right here, new warehouse robot could one day replace humans. One day. They're already making them. They're already testing them and shipping them out and implementing this entire system right before your eyes. I don't know where you live, but I live in a pretty small town, and even where I live, they're upgrading all of the box chains. So they all basically are run by robots. So Walmart, Home Depot, etc., the fast food chains, they already have a mostly robotic system in the way that they have computers running everything. Everything's set. It's an exact formula to do all of the jobs, tasks. You don't need any know-how to do these jobs. You just need to know your specific job and what the little formula is to, whether it's making the fries or stocking the shelves or whatever it is. So there's no thinking involved, which is making an entire country of unskilled workers with no critical thinking because they never have to figure out problems or any of these things. And then there's going to be this singularity where these companies are no longer going to employ the little guy that's been helping them build their business up to the billionaire status that it is. And maybe, I don't know how much profit they all get together, but I'm sure it's an enormous number. They're just going to cut the people out. It's similar to, what was it, Uber, that used people and drivers, and they've already admitted their plans. They're trying to change over to an all AI system. They're trying to change the entire way you order your food, pay your taxes, deal with government. Almost anything that the human being generally did in civilization, you are going to have to incorporate their new system of AI tracking and tracing, and it's getting to the point where there's nothing that they don't control. So we already bring our phone everywhere. The phone has the apps. The apps have the little QR reader, so we can prove where we're at. We can get discounts. We can join little discount clubs or know when the next sale is. And that's why they're mad about this whole idea of people reverting back to their skill sets of their forefathers. So I'm sure you've heard the lady in Italy speech about that they don't want to be a consumer. And it was a really good speech. I mean, they talked about how you're not allowed to be a human. You're not allowed to be a male or female. You're not allowed to be religious. You're not allowed to do this. You're only allowed to be the perfect consumer. And what does that entail? Well, that entails some kind of social credit score system that we've showed on this show is already being, talked about, and it's ready to implement here in the United States. And that is a very scary thing because they already did that in China. And the reason it's so scary is I don't really know what it was like, maybe 20 years ago in China as far as how it works. But I get a better picture of the technological aspect of it now since Dragonfly. They're making people wear bracelets. They have drones everywhere telling them everything. They're locking people down in areas, and no one knows what's going on from the outside world, what's happening to these people. But you have to ask yourself, do you really want to live in a time on a planet where some of the free countries of the world are practicing how to run a concentration camp, and some of the more authoritarian countries in the world already have them up and operating? And then let's get to, the point, to the scam kind of that it is, that the human being is the problem in this equation. We keep getting back to it, like from people to Bill Gates to the people at the World Economic Forum talking about, we have to do this and that. And there's some kind of leeway that we have to have, and we have to get rid of part of this equation. And that equation that they always come out with is that humans are the problem and us eating are the problem. And they lie and they say, like, you know, the cow farts, the sheep farts, when we really know that all of the carbon that's in the plants came out of the atmosphere, and the animals are eating it, they're digesting it, and they're putting it back in the atmosphere, which is a zero carbon net gain. So it's all a lie in the first place, designed to make you think that we need to reduce the population. And here we hit the perfect number of population. We just hit 8 billion. And every indicator is that in the next 40 years, the population is going to drop dramatically, just because of the mathematics of people getting old and less younger people. And now they're even, adding in the infertility rates, I should say, which have skyrocketed recently. So they know that we are at that plateau of the population right now. It's not in the future. They tried to tell people it was off in the future. It's right now. So they're doing all of their programs necessary to reduce the overall population of the world. And what does that entail? Convincing people to, maybe reduce their own population and their own families, and make them think that that's a good thing, and then cut them off of power, make them feel guilty that they even exist. And the possibility of multiplying is even pushed in their faces as that you're a really bad person for the environment. How dare you have 1, 2, 3 kids and have to eat, and maybe you farm and are self-sufficient. That is the enemy of this new system. And they're showing us right now that that's what it is. But don't worry about it. Worry about who's supposedly representing you in the government that you've never heard of, don't know. And, you're supposed to ignore all of these things. And you're supposed to believe that we're electing people that cannot speak in a normal way because of whatever condition they have. But it's not like that they were ever telling us anything anyway, because they always do the legalese double speak, where they say stuff and brag about it to your face and then deny it later. So that's the point we're at. So I think that this is the perfect time in our history as Americans, and maybe as the world, to just take their power away. And that starts with stop buying their stuff, stop agreeing with their crazy ideas, stop participating in their crazy mandates. Don't buy none of their products, grow as much stuff as you can, trade as much stuff as you can, and break the backbone of this reset, because they can't reset it without you. They can't reset it without me and you and the neighbor and everybody capitulating and just incrementally agreeing, well, it's not that bad. At least we rolled back, this draconian thing they were going to do. So we're only going to have to deal with this little bit of tyranny. And they just keep doing that. As you can see with the election cycle, what they're going to do for the next 2 years is entertain us with who's going to be the party that wins. Meanwhile, nothing's going to happen that benefits the American people or the world.
No way. Everybody's going underground during these next 2 years, keeping you distracted. Plasma discharge inbound, run to the dolmens. Yeah, I'm over here on the Mini Ice Age Conversations podcast channel, Spirit Free, saying that all these stores are getting to self-checkout, and soon it's going to only be self-checkout. And then, further down, talking about lines at the stores. And I've seen that myself. I had to run into Target. I was looking for ivermectin, and in Tennessee, it's supposed to be over the counter. So let me tell you my finding ivermectin over-the-counter stories here. So it's been passed, this is back in May, that you could just walk into a drugstore and buy that product, which was demonized over the counter. Okay. So I went in to do that into 4 different places. I went 2 mom and pops, and then 2 what you consider more like Target was one of them, because they said they had it there. And then there was another one that's pretty large, regional one. I was told no at all places. Nobody wants to take a chance of selling it over the counter. So we're in this fearful world of you can't even get medicine, even though it's legal to get it, you just still can't get it. But the whole point being, when I went into that Target, that morning to go say, hey, can I get some ivermectin? I need 3 milligram tablets. I know you have it here. I called, I talked to your pharmacist. I'm here to get it. It's over the counter, so I'd like to get a box. Well, it's still prescription. I was like, no, it's over the counter. I assure you it is. Please call your manager. Oh, yes, it is over the counter, but we don't have that kind of over the counter stuff. You have to get we only have the prescription one. And I'm like, wait a minute. The same medicine you're telling me that's available over the counter, now you're telling me it needs a prescription, but it's the same medicine. Yes, the over the counter one is a different category, like A, and the prescription one is B. And we sell ivermectin, we only sell category B. There's no over the counter. So even if we have ivermectin and it's legal, and we can sell it over the counter, we won't, because this kind you have to get a prescription for. You know, I'm trying to make sense of this. Like, what? Even though this lady was standing, you know, next to me waiting, and she just kind of perplexed, just kind of looking at the same, processing it that, what did she just say? You can, okay. But when I was walking back out, the line to go through the self-checkout, it was like 40 people deep, because they only had 2 of the machines apparently working. So they had massive amounts of people stacked up back there, nobody working at the registers. The only people there were the customer service people to help you get through the checkout. Now, luckily, I didn't buy anything because I sure wouldn't have stood in that line. But granted, it was on a Saturday morning. But I'm still perplexed. I still look at this. I'm shocked and baffled. Like, why would you stand in line for 30 minutes to then come to a self-checkout where you have to do it, and then you have somebody standing at the door going, we need to see your receipt and look in your bag? Because, dude, not my problem. You're not paying me as a chain checkouter. So if I make a mistake, that's on y'all's company. Screw you guys. I'm out of here. And I always do it. And, you know, I would do it if I was going to do this. I would do everything perfectly, and I'd walk away and just, nope, you're not checking my bags. And even if they got somebody to stop you and call the police, you're like, look, what do you mean? They have no right to stop me going out of the store. If you're going to put me in charge of checking on my own groceries and whatever and paying my own thing into there, you have no right to qualm about it. I wasn't trained. And then you get the comments like, well, you're making the people work there more. No, the whole system is making everybody work more and get you away from humans and interaction. Because when it does come to social credit score, and you're going to go in there with your allotted food, digital rationing card, there's going to be no human to talk to. It would not surprise me if they put those people that if your digital rationing card doesn't work, they would be behind glass or through a TV monitor to deal with you, much like they do in the courtrooms with the judge and then the defendant or whatnot. They do it a lot of times by video screen and thing. Same exact thing. We're moving into that. And Ransom, I can answer your question. I was living and working in China in 2002. And it wasn't that social credit score. It was talked about, and again, in the very beginning, they called it sesame credit. Like they moved it from what they know now. In the very beginning, it was called sesame credit, and they were making it fun and cartoonish like, and hey, anybody want to like beta test the system? And a lot of people, man, millions of people signed up, and hey, yeah, that'd be awesome, let's do that. And then those were the ones that were suddenly in charge of others that because they knew the tech. It was kind of weird. The beta testers became the overseers, which I found kind of interesting. I could say one thing I would take away that I did get out of that, even though when it was called social or sesame credit back like 2002, 3, 4, 5, it didn't have any repercussion. But they were gathering data on everybody, but there was no repercussion. Like, you know, you could still buy your high-speed railway ticket even though you were having a protest and, you know, writing online against the government. The CCP, that was totally whatever. You weren't penalized at that point. But I assure you, they were gathering every single letter typed on everybody. And then when it went live, then you were assigned a score. It didn't go live and then everybody kind of had to earn their score. You were already in the system programmed from years and years and years and years of data that you didn't even know you were being scraped from. And then when it went live, boom, everybody's assigned a score. Now, the scariest thing was, this is the thing that really, blew my mind about the whole thing. Okay, having cameras out there, you cross against a red light because there's no traffic. They put your picture up on the big screen with your details, like where your address is, who your employer is and stuff. Public embarrassment until the next person breaks the law, and then their picture takes your picture's place. But, you know, it could be up for 30 minutes, 30 hours until the next person breaks the rule. The public shaming thing is kind of weird too. Like, why did you put your, you know, street address and employer and all these things? But coming into that social credit, sesame credit thing was, it was bizarre how it overtook the human emotion of relationships. Because if you were assigned a score of, let's say, 550, you would never want to talk with anybody that's 549 because you would have your score at 549 down. And even a 1 or 2 point tick on your social credit score going down would affect what kind of food you can buy, what kind of train you can ride on, what kind of apartment a landlord will rent somebody to, depending on their score. So if you were mixing with somebody who was a 500 and you were a 550, oh, that's just, you got to be kidding me. You're mixing, yeah, you're down in the slums. So this is it's straight. If you think our society is divided and segmented at this point, you ain't seen nothing yet, as they would say. In China, they have striated it down to a single credit score of everybody in different layers of cream self-assembling into the 501 range, the 502 range, the 551 range, the 602 range. You only go up. You never talk with anybody lower. So if your parents had a much lower social credit score because they're normal people, by you going to Chinese New Year dinner with them and being associated with them and sending text messages and things, their very low score will affect your score now. So there's been whole families that don't even talk to each other anymore because of this. And heaven forbid your friends, you know, like you be friends in university and people you work with, etc. But as soon as all this came out, oh, everybody's segregated into like their little cliques of 500 to 510. They all hang out together. The 550 to 560s, they hang out all together, but they never hang out with the 500 to the 510 people because it's going to ruin their credit score. Even though they're their best friend for an entire life. Oh, sorry, man. I can't be seen talking to you, dude. Any street camera picks us up, I'm going to get dinged on my score just because I'm next to you. And that's what really the scariest thing was about it. Is the way it dissected, smashed, dashed, chopped, ground out all relationships in the society into allegiance for the state, period. They live, move, breathe, and die by that credit score. Higher it is, the more opportunities you have. More doors literally open magically for you. The lower it is, the more closed off society becomes for you, to the point where you can't even rent an apartment. I don't care. You're not renting an apartment at all. You're going to live on the street and you are going to starve to death. And that's what they want. If it gets too low, then you should be out living like an animal because you don't agree with the state. And that's my personal experience from saying, I know it's, you know, everybody's going to have different stories, but I mean, that's my own account of witnessing the beginning of it to where I see it is now. And that 20-year transition from, oh, it's a friendly, fun thing, into I don't talk to my dad anymore or my mom or anybody on my mom's side because they all have too low social credit scores. So I deleted every one of them. And that's the whole thing. You can't be connected on like WeChat or anything. Line accounts, boom, got to cut them out. Anything pay systems or like Alipay or whatnot. Oh man, if you're directly sending money like I do to PayPal, I send PayPal money to people. They have a thing called Alipay over there. And WeChat also has its own pay system. If you were to be even seen sending money to somebody that's lower on your social credit score, not only will you lose access to functionality in your online banking, but your social credit score gets dinged as well. So you can't even be associated with even anybody even in your family. You can't send them money because if you send them money, you're going to get taken down on your social credit score. This is what it's de-evolved into. And that's where we're going in the States. We're probably like 2005 right now. If I was going to give it a range of where maybe we sit with the social credit score and the inbounding of it, they can't rush it in because they got to have central bank digital currencies in for the ultimate play for the U.S. market here. They just did it by brute force in China. Seriously, just straight brute force. But in America, they got to have a little more finesse because everybody's armed out. So how will they do it? Oh, we're going to collapse the economy. Like we go back to the beginning of the show here. A lot of financial woes are coming in. New digital currency system, then they can roll out the social credit system. Like you're not going to have the social credit roll out before the money rolls out. So if you're looking in order, like I don't have exact dates, but I try to really focus on the event-based timeline. So if we come into some huge sort of market meltdown scenario where everything on the planet locks up, and then whatever form that might take in terms of governments all agreeing, okay, liquidity is not there, unemployment's high, we don't have any options, we're going to have to take everything to zero, and we're going to move it over into central bank digital currencies and your personal allocation carbon credits, and everything will be digital for money from this point. That is an event to look for, because when that happens, very shortly after that, not even 2 years, probably like a year or less, or almost even in conjunction, 6-month delay time, they're going to start rolling out the social credit right then. Because you're going to have to be on the digital rationing card to get your foods, and then suddenly it's going to be tied instantly to what you wrote online, who you talked to, all these things. And at that point, Ransom, can you describe the map you sent me earlier? I was trying to look at it, but I didn't understand exactly what. I think there's something there, but you not take that thought that I was just talking about and run with it into your map there and see how fast you think that timeline is.
Right. Let me load that back up. Basically, it was somebody putting off a map that was depicting 2018, the countries around the world and who they do business with, the United States or China. And then that same type of map in 2020, which showed the majority of the world has now contracted to go with China, including most of South America, Africa, and the other Asian countries, and even some European ones. Let me load that map again. But the whole time I was listening to this credit score thing, and it's already happened here. It just came in another form, kind of like you said, because various reasons. But here, they did the same thing. And you were talking about the family, how the families wouldn't even, they break up and they stop talking to each other. And it's a complete loyalty to the state because they don't want to be associated with the other person's opinions or behaviors or anything like that. And I ask you, has that not just happened in the United States? They just call it, your left or your right. And the same thing has happened in the last couple of years here, where there's a self-inflicted credit score on all the social media stuff. And that's one way to do it. So they were shaming people at restaurants. They're boycotting people. They're doxing people. Calling people fascist. It goes back and forth, obviously, from right to left and left to right, because it's the extreme of tribalism. And they're using that exact thing to usher in this credit score system here. Because after all, what have we been talking about for the past couple of years? Not worrying about our food or infrastructure or nothing like that. We've been worried about how you speak, who you've offended, what you did wrong, if you followed the wrong politician or not. And this has been transitioned over into the business world. Matter of fact, here's a article I found from last year. I was looking up that while you were talking. Coming soon, America's own social credit score. This is from The Hill from last year in 2021. But it talks about how this, the war on terror kicking in and social media and how everybody views each other, including the part about families not, getting along with each other. PayPal, announcing partnership with Southern Poverty Law Center. And then it wasn't 9 months after that they started saying they were going to just steal your money if you said the wrong thing on any kind of social platform. So they already have this social media score behavior kind of already going. Half the population is saying no, but there's a big portion of our population that have already accepted it and feel like it's on their side of things. But I just want to remind people where this ends up. Where does it end up? Take a look. This is an article from Zero Hedge. Take a rare glimpse inside China's zero COVID madhouse. And, you know, earlier you were talking about your social credit score and how it might implicate or not implicate, it might decide what kind of, lifestyle you're living. Are you allowed to ride the train? Are you allowed to go to the movies? Are you allowed to take school? Are you allowed to go to college? Are you allowed to post on social media? They already have that all figured out, like you said, in China. Even what kind of apartment you can rent or, what kind of food you can buy by which store you can go to. And then you put that back on that map that we were talking about, and you realize that China's influence is so heavy around the world that some of these other countries are going to start adopting these policies in order to get resources from the biggest economic entity that's going on right now, which is China. And let me load this image file. It was just a point somebody was making on Twitter about it. And he may be actually wrong. This map may not be accurate, but the idea is in motion, and you can kind of prove that by different metrics, that China is overtaking the United States as the only economic superpower and soon to be another military superpower. And it just shows the globe here on this map here. All of these blue countries would have been countries that were doing business in 2000 with the United States, which includes Russia, almost all of South America, over half of Africa, Europe. And then the new map in 2020 shows all of these other nations, especially South America, Africa, and Asia, and Russia, and half of Europe, including France, are all now doing business with China over the United States. But let's get back to this social credit score and where it leads. Well, if you have a bad social credit score, I already listed out some examples how in the United States that could affect you. But look at these apartments. This is inside this area, and they use all of the same tools related to the social credit score to decide whether or not people deserve to go to these camps. And that's kind of what I was talking about earlier, is they practice these camps in several countries. They just made it a little more friendly than the Chinese are doing it. And the Chinese, they're pretty friendly. But let me tell you from my own experience in life, that this is not a place that, just judging by the way it's built with this cot, a toilet, and a sink, and bars on the windows, this is where they make people go if they, got the wrong test results. And they go in there and they live. Now, what happens to them after that, I really don't know. And most of the world doesn't know. Supposedly, there's treatments or whatever, but you're seeing the weird and bizarre things that they're doing currently. And this is supposed to be after the pandemic's over. But just look at this place. They're little teeny tiny apartments. And this reminds me of another thing. How is all of these ultranational, international agencies, the NGOs and stuff, are pushing on people that they don't want to, that you're not supposed to live in a single family home, but instead a little tiny home, a little tiny house, and then we had all those fires in California that ironically allowed the government to rezone large swaths of single family home area into places that are only zoned for this type of arrangement. And if you look at it, doesn't that not look like what you would be getting if your social credit score was at the bottom and you needed a place to stay? It would be a little apartment just like this with bars on the windows, one toilet, one sink, and just enough room to lay down. And they're already doing that with the same system for a different excuse. Now, what if they just start deciding for whatever reason that you pollute too much or you're too much of a burden on society? And I kind of wanted to get into that because, there's a fad around the world, and this goes back into the population discussion about how they're trying to or say that we're overpopulated. Now there's a headset of a game, and it is just ironic. It's a headset of a game that is designed to kill you if you lose in the game, right? And now that sounds far-fetched, I know, but think about all the countries that have now laws where you're allowed to kill yourself, have assisted suicide. You can pay a little bit of money and go to sleep. There's been states, all kinds of reasons and ways to make it easier to not have a family, to not have a long, prosperous life, to not own land, not be self-sufficient, not have energy, not do any of these things that are bad. And this is the cult that they're putting on everybody. And if you really think about it, they already have most of the world in line. We're kind of like the last, vestige of free thinking. We're outliers here in the U.S. So they have to do something about us. And what better way to do that is to implement this behavior credit score system based on politics and what you're supposed to believe in the public. If they can ban you from restaurants and get you kicked off of platforms, and say that because you had an opinion about something, you owe $1 billion to them, right? Or, in the case of Alex Jones, because I think that is the biggest joke in the planet that I've ever seen, that whole a fake trial or whatever it was, where they're trying to say that somebody's opinion that changed. And then they even said they were sorry, they were wrong, but you still owe $1 billion. Now put that down on the little person and join it to that social credit score system. Oops, you made a bad tweet. Guess what? Your interest at the bank is going up. Guess what? Your food allotment for your EBT card just went down. You know what? Your rent is going to go up. We don't want you in this part of town now because of things you've said or things you've done. Meanwhile, on the street level, you get all of these disenfranchised people that are never going to be dealing with the social credit score at all, either because they're addicted to drugs, because they live in a crime area and that's just what they do, or they're homeless. And we know that those numbers are going to skyrocket, right? Which puts a lot more people in line for bad health and dying off of populations. It's so interconnected and in your face that I guess that's why some people would like to just put it in the back of their minds and pretend it's not happening. But we still have the option of, we still have a semi-functional government here. And I think from the local level, you could really change things to the point where everything's friendly for us to be self-sufficient, protect ourselves, have families, grow food, etc. The American dream that has somehow turned into a nightmare.
Oh, we need to have positive affirmations tonight, Ransom. Yeah. Think about it. They want to keep you in that state. So think about the world around us as vibration, and if you can be put into, and I'm not talking about one or two people, but I'm talking about 500 million, 1 billion, 2 billion people. If you were to put them all into the similar vibration, then would the planet itself change its vibratory pattern? And see, if we're walking outside that, we would see a lot of changes, because 5 billion or 6 billion people vibrating a certain way is probably going to change structurally what we perceive as reality, because we're on the same planet, manifesting in conjunction with. But if there were 6 billion people in the exact same range of energies, let's say, and we weren't in that energy range, then we would step outside and we would see the madness. And we would see the chaos that it is.
Yeah.
But perhaps everybody else living within that vibration feels comfortable and they feel like the world's orderly. Maybe it's just my perception. I don't know.
Well, I want to ask you a question, because I was thinking about this earlier. I'm sure you're familiar with the 100 monkeys idea, right? That 100 monkeys.
For sure.
Yeah, so they teach a new skill, or the monkeys learn something new on an island, and when it hits about 100 monkeys, somehow monkeys of the same species on another island have all of a sudden miraculously attained this skill without any interaction from the other monkeys, insinuating that there's some kind of psychic connection. And that's kind of what you're talking about putting out the positive vibes. And I wanted to ask you, do you believe that's a real phenomenon? And if so, if monkeys are that way, are not humans exactly the same way? Like if 100 human beings started believing in something, it's going to become more likely to be real. And then you're talking about like 6 billion people. Now, think about that in the way that they only use the 100 monkeys example when they're talking about some kind of positive attribute that the monkeys gained. And my question for you is, would that not be the same in reverse? Meaning that if you had 100 monkeys and they were all in a little area being tortured and starved and whatever, are the other monkeys on the other island going to feel bad? Are they going to feel paranoid and fearful and stuff like that? And if so, what about humans? And then that puts you in the idea of, for the last 2 years, children are having learning issues, speech problems, and different things for various different reasons. So my question is that not affecting all the kids that are not part of the system, that are not participating in that? So like what I'm saying is basically like me or you might not participate in the fear level that they're trying to push because we're like analyzing it and trying to decide what that means. But other people are having fear. Does that fear bleed off on the people that don't want it? So like the little kids also having learning problems for no reason when they weren't around the mask people and the other stuff. So it's like if we could get everyone thinking along a positive thing, do you think that monkey idea is a real thing, and does it affect humans? I would say yes, but that's just me.
I would say yes too, but have you noticed how the media works to take people away from the positive coming together? Now, let's go back to the year 1999. 2 quarters for all the time machine travelers out there. Remember 1999 when it was turning into the year 2000? This was going to be the biggest party in 1,000 years, and people were so stoked on it and just like super ripped and like, yeah, it's going to be the most. And it was like that for 6 months coming in, and then suddenly it was about 6 months out. Oh, watch out at the parties. Oh, look out for this event. Oh, this group of people is going to throw something in a bag over there, and ooh, you better be careful. And then it became a nonstop. Well, the police are out more tonight. They're all looking for these. Look, if you see a stray bag on the thing, and it just rolled into that. What could have been the most joyous human coming together, which Ransom, I do believe you're referencing. But the way the media played it, it was all fear for even going out to enjoy the turn of the millennium. So that was a big one. Like every time there's something in humanity that brings it toward, like the truckers over in Canada, they give a lot of people a lot of hope. And we really saw how corrupt everything was because of that. You got no rights, no free speech. You have nothing, no private property. You got nothing. You are literally a serf with the illusion of ownership and the illusion of rights is what I saw in front of me going on in Canada. Now it's exactly the same here. It's an illusion. So anytime that this illusionary break happens, imagine if everybody just kind of broke through the matrix. A billion people saw and thought the same way me and Ransom were like, all right, well, how do we change this and get a billion people thinking the same thing on a single day? 100th monkey? Vibration equalization? Because a lot of vibratory patterns they'll start to sync with each other and overlay. Like some of them cancel each other out, like the Bose headset. Like there's got to be an equal and opposite canceling pattern wave that's on top of that could nullify or stop this fear. Got to be an equal, there has to be something that will stop this wave of vibration, because I totally agree that the others are affecting. Since there's more of the fear base, it's now dribbling in and affecting. Because going even, pre-1999 or pre-9/11, I mean, the whole world was just like what it was. There was no solid rock base of fear that everybody was living under. It was just different. After 9/11, yeah, okay, the whole terrorist thing, okay, well, that brought us up to the COVID thing. That was the big step. Everything up until that point was little tiny baby steps, and then boom, we got hit with this. At the same time, the major food shortages and global famines are inbound. So yes, I'll agree that the fear that's out there currently is a vibratory interference pattern with the rest of us.
I'm just waiting for the cookbook of how to serve human here.
I'm watching something on trying to compare 4 different types of Parmesan cheese and which one's the best. The little one you buy dried in the flaked powder already, the bigger chunks that are already dried for you, 12-month aged or 3 years aged. And yeah.
I'm taking this whole future possibilities pretty serious, because this is a little article just to put stuff in perspective about where things could go. It's an article from the Sun about Russian troops that ran out of their rations and were cut off. So they ate the zoo animals. And, I'm thinking if things get really bad at the supermarket end of stuff, what kind of violence is going to show up from people trying to do stuff like this? Your dog is quite juicy. I noticed you had a Great Dane next door. It's a horrible thought, but how bad could it get? I don't know. But I've been trying to keep in mind that things may go good if enough people stop it. And even though you don't see those people out there in the public and in the world, they're there. There are lots of people that are trying to, stop all of these crazy ideas because they don't agree with them. And I realized, looking at the supposing voting numbers, they're saying that Generation Z is the reason that most of the Democrats won. And then I come across this article, that says that 80% of Generation Z is, on medications for different mental disorders. And, I hope that's not the truth, that there's that much. 42%. Here it is. I'll show it to the audience here. If I hit the right one. There it is. 42% of Generation Z diagnosed with mental health conditions, survey reveals. And I'm thinking, well, how about that? That makes sense.
And the survey says, Gen Z, World War Z. That was a movie, Brad Pitt. Remember that one? So why? And then we got the Z with On the Tank. So there's a lot of Z's floating around. It all appears to be
the last letter in the alphabet.
And Zelensky starts with a Z. Oh, dance it away. Better than a TikTok video. See you next week, David DuByne, Ransom, Godwin, signing off.
Thank you for listening to Revolution.